The night I moved into the house on Blackpine Road, I found my name carved into the kitchen wall, dated 1979, 11 years before I was born. It was a small thing, just 3 letters, Eli, scratched near the window frame beneath flaking white paint. But it stopped me cold. The letters looked old, the grooves filled with the same dust and age as the rest of the wall. I stood there in the faint light of my phone, heart thudding, wondering who would have done that and why. The house had been empty for decades, or so I'd been told. My great-uncle Raymond left it to me when he passed. I never met the man. He'd lived as a recluse on this stretch of the Washington coast, a mist-shrouded road that wound through towering Douglas firs and ended at the ocean. When I arrived that evening, fog clung to the tree-line, rolling in from the sea like something alive. The house stood at the end of the gravel drive, 3 stories of gray cedar and narrow windows. The realtor called it a coastal craftsman with potential. To me, it looked like a bruise. Inside, the air was thick with salt and mold. Old photographs lined the hall, sepia faces staring out with eyes I didn't recognize. One picture showed a man who looked almost like me, only older, standing on the porch with a dog. The photo was dated 1979. I laughed, nervously, telling myself it was just a coincidence, an ancestor with a familiar face. But the unease settled in early, like fog beneath the door. That night, I unpacked the bare essentials, a sleeping bag, a lamp, my camera, and a thermos of coffee. I planned to document the restoration, maybe write a piece about the house's history. The floorboards creaked with each step as if the place were breathing. Around midnight, while reviewing old property documents, I noticed something else. The address on the oldest deed wasn't 19 Blackpine Road. It was written in faded ink as 19 Blackpine Return. I brushed it off as a clerical error, though the phrasing stuck in my mind, return. Before turning in, I checked the kitchen again. The name was still there, faint and shallow. I ran my fingers over the grooves. The paint crumbled, leaving white dust on my fingertips. And then, from the next room, a sound. Soft. Like someone quietly dragging a chair across the floor. I froze. The air felt charged, the silence too thick. I told myself it was just the old wood settling, that the sea wind had found a way inside. But as I stood there, the chair sound came again, slower, closer. When I finally turned the corner, the dining room was empty. Only a single chair had shifted slightly away from the table, its legs leaving shallow trails in the dust. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I noticed something new carved beneath my name on the kitchen wall. A date. Tomorrow's. I didn't leave the house that morning. I told myself I'd just stay long enough to document the interior, take a few photographs, and go back to my apartment in Seattle by nightfall. But the light in the house had changed, soft and gray, filtering through mist that never seemed to lift. The new carving was there beneath my name, unmistakable. June 12, 2023. Tomorrow. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the grooves with a shaking finger. It wasn't new. The edges were old, filled with dust and age like the rest. It was impossible. I tried to distract myself by photographing the rooms. My camera, an old Canon, clicked and whirred as I moved from one corner to another, the narrow staircase, the parlor, the long hall that led toward the back of the house. But when I reviewed the photos on the screen, each frame looked just slightly off. The furniture seemed shifted, the curtains drawn differently. In one image of the kitchen, I could swear I saw the chair pushed neatly against the table again. I told myself I was tired. The house, after all, was only wood and memory. That afternoon, the rain started, slow at first, then steady, soaking the moss-covered shingles outside. The air smelled of wet cedar and salt. As I explored the upper floor, I found a narrow door at the end of the hallway. It was wedged shut with paint, maybe decades old. When I pushed, the frame groaned and splintered. Inside was a small room, more of a crawlspace, really. Dust floated like smoke in the beam of my flashlight. There was a single chair, a small desk, and a stack of yellowed envelopes tied with string. I pulled one free. It was addressed in faded ink to Eli, 1979. My pulse quickened. I sat on the floor and tore it open carefully. The letter was short. If you're reading this, it means you came back. The house always brings you back. Don't stay past tomorrow. It remembers you. It always does. No signature. Just a faint dark fingerprint at the bottom, like a smudge of soot. I went through the other envelopes, each one addressed the same way, each in the same shaky handwriting. The messages varied only slightly, warnings, fragments, strange apologies. One read, "You shouldn't have written your name." By dusk, I'd gone through them all. My hands were shaking. I tried to call someone, a friend, anyone, but there was no signal. The landline was dead, its cord cut cleanly near the wall. As the light faded, I felt the house tighten around me. The air grew heavier, like the humidity before a storm. I walked back downstairs, telling myself I'd pack and leave first thing in the morning. But as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard a faint creak, the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps above me. Someone walking, pacing the hallway I'd just left. I froze. "Hello." My voice sounded too loud. The pacing stopped. For a long moment, silence. Then, faintly, a whisper that wasn't mine. "You shouldn't have written your name." The same words as the letter. I bolted to the kitchen, grabbed my camera, and turned it toward the stairs. The viewfinder flickered. Through the lens, I saw a shape, not solid, not clear, just the outline of a man, faintly reflective, standing at the top of the steps. He looked exactly like me. I dropped the camera. The sound of it hitting the floor broke the silence, and when I looked again, the stairs were empty. The storm broke then, thunder rolling, rain slashing against the windows. I turned every light in the house on and stayed awake until dawn, sitting on the kitchen floor beside my name carved in the wall. When the first light of morning finally reached the kitchen, the date beneath my name had changed again. It now read, June 13, 2023. Today. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of light that doesn't warm anything. I'd spent the whole night on the kitchen floor, dozing off only in short bursts. Each time I woke, I expected the carving to be gone, or changed, or deeper somehow. It wasn't. But something else was. The photograph that had hung crooked in the hallway, the one of the man who looked like me, was lying on the floor, glass shattered. When I picked it up, I saw that the date written on the back wasn't 1979 anymore. It now read 2023. I stopped pretending it was all coincidence. The house wasn't haunted in the way I'd thought, not with ghosts of strangers or flickering shapes in the dark. It was haunted by repetition, by memory looping on itself, by whatever had happened here trying to happen again. I went outside for air. The fog was so thick I couldn't see past the tree line. The ocean was invisible, but I could hear it, the constant low thunder of waves. The whole landscape felt suspended in place, caught between moments. When I went back in, I noticed the floorboards near the dining room had darkened, warped as if by water. I crouched, pried one loose. Beneath it lay a small tin box wrapped in plastic. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them, of the kitchen, all taken from the same angle. In every photograph, the same table, the same light through the same window. But in each one, someone sat in the chair closest to the wall. Me. The first few showed my face clearly, but as they went on, I looked older, hair longer, expression more hollow. The last photo was completely black. My hands were shaking. I dropped the box, the Polaroids spilling like fallen cards. I backed away, bumping into the table. That was when I heard it again, the faint scrape of a chair. The same one. Always the same one. I turned slowly. There, at the table, the chair had moved itself slightly outward. Steam rose from a mug that hadn't been there before. The air smelled faintly of salt and coffee. I whispered, "What do you want?" The silence seemed to listen. Then the bulb above me flickered once, twice. I swear I heard my own voice answer, not from my mouth, but from somewhere deeper in the house. To finish. I ran. Up the stairs, down the hall, into the small crawlspace where I'd found the letters. I needed to understand, to see if there was something I'd missed. The letters were still there, but now another envelope lay on top of the pile, fresh paper, no dust, ink still wet. It was addressed to Eli, 2023. Inside, in the same handwriting as before. It isn't memory. It's a door. The house doesn't keep the past, it brings it back. You can leave only if you give it what it's asking for. I read it 3 times. Give it what it's asking for. Downstairs, something creaked. The air had changed again, warmer, charged. I could smell the sea now, heavy and close. I stepped back into the hall and froze. The walls were breathing. Subtle, rhythmic. As though the house itself had a pulse. The photographs on the wall shimmered slightly, faces moving, turning toward me as I passed. I whispered, "Raymond." My voice cracked. "Is this what you did?" No answer, but a soft sound came from the kitchen, the scrape of cutlery, a low hum, almost like someone breathing through a half-open mouth. When I reached the doorway, the sight stopped me cold. The kitchen was full of light, impossible, blinding daylight flooding through the windows though the outside was still fog. The table was set with 2 plates of food. Steam rose from both. The second chair had pulled itself out. I felt dizzy, like the room had tilted. Something in my head whispered that if I sat down, it would all make sense, that maybe this was what Raymond had done, that maybe this was how the house finished. But then I looked at the wall, at my name, the carvings, the dates, and saw that a new line had appeared beneath them. Stay. That broke whatever spell was left. I stumbled backward, knocking into the counter. My camera clattered to the floor, the shutter clicking on its own. When I picked it up, the screen showed a live view, but not of me. It showed the kitchen empty. And yet, I was standing in it. The realization hit like a wave of cold air. The camera wasn't seeing this moment. It was seeing another, or maybe the same one, looped and replayed. The voice, my voice, came again, closer, like a whisper against my ear. "It remembers you." That was when the front door slammed open. The wind howled through the hall. Every light went out. The only glow came from the carving on the wall, faintly luminous now, the letters breathing like the walls. I bolted for the stairs, the camera swinging against my chest, and didn't stop until I burst out into the fog. I ran down the drive, not looking back, the mist swallowing everything. When I finally stopped running and looked back through the fog, I saw the house still glowing faintly through the trees. And in the upstairs window, a figure stood watching me, my face, older, smiling. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in my car at the edge of the gravel drive, the mist curling around the tires like fingers. I watched the house until the fog grew thick enough to swallow it whole. Morning came gray again. I packed the essentials, camera, notebooks, and the letters I'd found. I didn't look back as I drove down Blackpine Road. The coastal forest loomed around me, silent and wet. Each tree seemed to lean in, listening, judging. When I reached the highway, I pulled over. My hands were shaking. I opened the camera and reviewed the last set of images. Most were static, blank. But one, just one, showed the kitchen, empty, the second chair drawn out slightly, steam curling from a plate that didn't exist. I realized then that I had survived, physically. But the house had left its mark. The letters, the carvings, the photographs, even the faint whisper of my own voice, it lingered inside me. Weeks passed, but I could still feel it when I closed my eyes. Sometimes in my apartment in Seattle, the smell of salt and coffee would creep in, faint but undeniable. I would see the chair at the table, drawn out, waiting. I tried to tell people, but no one believed me. It wasn't ghosts. It wasn't poltergeists. It was the house, a memory, a repetition, a door between times that wanted me to stay, wanted me to finish what Raymond had started. I never went back to Blackpine Road. But I could never escape the feeling that the house was watching, remembering. And sometimes, late at night, when the fog is thick and the wind presses against the windows, I hear the scrape of a chair, faint, deliberate, and I know it is waiting for someone else to return. I survive. That much is true. But some part of me, the part that touched that kitchen wall, that read those letters, that stared into the face of my own photograph, that part will always belong to the house. I keep the letters in a drawer, unopened, as if ignoring them could erase the house's memory of me. It doesn't. I know it doesn't. The house remembers. And I have learned, finally, that some doors, once opened, never close.